Hi everybody. So I apologize for the delay in the critique. I was having some problems downloading files, which is something I've managed to get all the files I need. And if you run into problems downloading files from the classroom, especially the larger ones, let me know because I think that would be good information for tech support. In any case, because of the delay, what I'm going to do is move the final submission from Wednesday, tomorrow, to Thursday, so that you have an extra day to work on it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our week 3 review of the character projects. So this week, what we're doing is we're really actually taking a pretty big step in terms of Photoshop. And I know that I heard from some people in terms of their experience working on the classroom in a book exercise that it was the most challenging, and it definitely, I think it's the most challenging classroom in a book exercise that we do in this class. You'll find that the next two that we do for milestone 4 and milestone 5, those are the last two, are just going to be really, I think they're pretty straightforward. Pretty much everybody finds them, just really easygoing. But this one, which is, hold on, let me just grab an image of it. Let me just get in a large version. So this one right here, this is what you were working on. First of all, the classroom in a book exercise does have a lot of different steps, dealing with, I don't know, channels and things like that. And so it just takes some time. And then also just working with the hair, it's kind of finicky. I would say that there's really the most important thing that you are learning or kind of working on is the layer mask. So you added another object using a layer mask, or that was the goal. And I know some of you are still working with that, and that's okay. It's definitely one of the steps. And it's going to end up sort of looking like this, where you have a photograph with a layer mask on it. And like I told some of the folks in their comments in the submission area, the best place to learn about working on a layer mask, I think the most straightforward way is in the milestone 2 tutorial, which is, for this assignment, the tutorial that walks you through how to take your photographs and apply the layer mask on them. So if you're struggling with that step in this assignment, take a look at that and use those directions. I think they happen, a little bit ways into the tutorial, and then just follow those steps for adding your object into your exercise. People sort of approach layer masks slightly differently. I think the classroom in a book exercise is a little bit, not that clear, which is why we have these other tutorials available. So just keep that in mind, and then use that just to to practice your layer masks. And so once you get the layer mask, though, this concept, I think the rest of this class will be much more straightforward. So if you're struggling with it this week, do take the time to really just get a sort of understanding of how it works, like how to create one. Because once you get that, then it's just a matter of like fine-tuning them. Okay, so that's one of the main things that we're actually doing. Well, is there anything else I want to say about this exercise? Everything else that I think we're doing here in this exercise is not as important. We're going to be using adjustment layers again. Those are pretty easy, and there's like a tutorial, like an actual tutorial in the learning path on how to do that. Puppet warp is something we've introduced where you tip the guy backwards. Remember that? That's a cool technique. Some of you, we may not need to use it again, but for some of you, I think your character projects can add a lot of great movement to your characters. And I wouldn't worry about it for this particular week, but later on, it's something you can play with, and maybe we'll talk more individually in the group critique. Okay, so that's it. So, but again, layer mask, top thing to learn this week. Okay, so we're going to head back into our group critique. Okay, so what you're doing here is you were taking your photographs and then assembling them into, you know, the kind of a basic structure of your character, like the broad strokes. And we've got like several more weeks. Let's see, we've got this week, and then one, two, three, like three sort of more installments, you could say, that we're going to kind of fine tune it. So this week, I'm going to really focus on making sure everybody has layer masks. We'll talk we'll kind of try to talk about how, if we need to kind of tweak the design, and again, we'll be continuing to do that for the rest of it. And so this is just the first sort of draft of working on the character design. And that's mostly the most important thing. You are also going to be adding the name of the character, just like right here, Terrible Toys Todd, whatever your character is, any text you want, you just kind of put it in a placeholder somewhere in your design. Doesn't have to be designed at all. You just take the type tool, maybe we'll do that on somebody's, you just take the type tool and type the name for your character, use the name from week 1, you know, that Eclipse Entertainment gave you, whichever one you chose, and just pop it in there. And then next week, what we'll be doing is we'll be doing maybe a little bit more you know, creative stuff with the text. But for now, that's all you need. All right, well, let's get going. So one more thing before we get to the character project. So the character project, the instructions have a tutorial on applying a layer mask, which I've been, you know, really highlighting that everyone should watch to work with layer masks. It's really, really good. But it kind of does the broad strokes of creating a layer mask. What happens if you've got little bits left over of the background? Which happens very often, especially like in complex areas like the hair. And I noticed a lot of folks had this issue, which is, again, it's very common. And the way to solve that very easily is to actually go to your layer mask right here. So this is the image and the layer mask right here. You can see it, the black and white layer mask. You actually can just double click on that layer mask. Just double click on it. And it opens up this area in here where we can work just on the layer mask. And what I would typically do for something like this is go up into something called the Refine Edge Brush tool. Can you see right here? It's the second one down. And you can make it bigger or smaller. You can control it up here. Or you can actually use the bracket keys on your keyboard. So the left bracket, you know, makes it smaller and the right bracket makes it bigger. And what you can do is just using one pass only. You just want to pass over an area once. You can just pass over it. See, what I'm doing here is I'm passing over it just once. And yeah, so it kind of got rid of all that extra white. Now, why don't you want to do more? And you would just do it anywhere, like if you have little bits left over, like actually you hear the mouth here. There's a little bit of the background. Let's just clip it. Okay, now that didn't work. Can you see what happened? It actually started removing too much of the guy. So sometimes Photoshop can figure it out and sometimes not. So we're going to take that back and we're going to just let that little white bit stay there because it's not really that distracting. But just one pass, and the reason why we only do one pass is if you do it more times, then Photoshop will kind of keep working at the image and it'll start doing what it did here. It's kind of pulls too much out. Like it'll make areas too translucent. Okay, so that's all you really need to do here probably to fix your issue if you have this issue with your classroom in a book exercise that we just did. Do this trick. I bet it'll probably fix it. Okay. Okay, Conrad, all right. Yes, so for this particular phase of the assignment, there's no need to use a background. In fact, a background can make it a little bit harder to design your character because it can get in the way. What is a good idea is, let's just create a new layer down here. Hold on, let me just, there we go. And I'm going to just put a white actually I'm going to put a black background behind it because you'll see in a minute if you put a black background or just something really dark, what you can often see is where you might have some edges of your layer mask that you need to work on. And I think overall, yours are looking pretty good. Yeah, so, and what you're looking for here, oh, this looks to be your sketch, is you're looking for the layer mask hiding exactly what you've done here, hiding the background. This is what we call non-destructive editing, and it means that you can go back and edit that layer mask um, and make changes to it. So that's exactly what you want to do here, is have that. And you can see what I did here is I right-clicked on the layer mask, and you can turn it off and turn it on right in there just to see what you have. You can also see it right in here. You can see, oh, there's the photo, the full photo. What I do in Photoshop that I just find really helpful is a good tip. Let's see if I can get this on my recording screen. So right here in the layers panel, if you click on it, and this is just a general comment for everybody, you can go to panel options in here. And then what I always like to do, especially when I'm really focused on lot of layers, is I make the thumbnail size in here the biggest size. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, that's a personal preference, but I find when I'm just looking at all these layer masks, it really helps me out. So all of these look really good. Look at all that. Did a lot of work here. And there's maybe a few in here that don't have layer masks right in here. I don't know quite what that's from. It looks like some kind of Velcro piece, but so that's it. So I would just bring back that. Looks like it's maybe oh, there's another one here. So if it's not an object, so this is not an object, and I'm kind of guessing actually that this is not a photograph, just because maybe it's a drawing or a vector. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell, but I'm guessing because you did such a wonderful job here with all these other ones that you do, you're pretty good, the layer mask is something you really know how to do. So I would say that just remove those for now. Again, because we want to have everything as objects. And then if you want to add, if you find a replacement for that later on, some other type of object you can use, feel free to do that. But I don't know if you necessarily need to have that. So let's just actually look at the design now. It's always good to kind of get a view of the design. Now that we've looked at your layer mask, I'm actually going to just turn this layer off. It's a little well, actually, maybe what I'll do is I'm going to change this and let's just go back to this layer, and I think what I'll do here is just instead put a white background behind, just to make it a little bit easier. Let me hold on. Okay, there we are. Yeah, so overall I think I really like the arms, the body, the legs, the scissors. I think that's a really cute thing. And yours, I can really see, you don't have to worry about this for this particular assignment, but I can see at some point maybe doing a little bit of puppet warp, maybe on the feet, like to have them kind of moving a little bit more, in some kind of foot-like way, or maybe it's going to run a little bit. That can give your character a little bit more life, which is always good. But again, don't worry about that right for now. I'm just sort of thinking ahead. These little guys here, somehow these feel like they don't quite fit yet. And I wonder if it's just the edges here of your it's almost like this kind of like edge here. I almost want to like trim it off, kind of clean that up and sort of maybe mask it off. There is a way to do that. So right on the, so if Photoshop doesn't always select everything you want. Sometimes it selects more, sometimes it selects less. So the technique that I do when I want to manually fix something is what I do is, here's the layer, we're on the layer, you can click on two places. You can click on either the photograph or the layer mask. So for this technique, we want to click onto that layer mask. So we're going to work directly on the layer mask. So this is an important step. Then what we do, when you do that, what happens is your paintbrush becomes a masking tool instead of the regular paintbrush. So I'm going to click that paintbrush, and if you look at the layer mask, you'll notice what's happening here with the layer mask. The black color here is hiding the photograph, and that's going to be true for everybody's layer mask. So the black hides and the white reveals. So I want to maybe cover up some of this orange stuff here. So what I do is I take my paintbrush, I change my color to black down here, and now my paintbrush becomes a masking tool. You see that? So I can go over and just go in, and this is where zooming in, you know, if you want to do a technique like this, zooming in is really helpful. You can kind of clean this, you know, you can just see what I'm doing here. I'm just going in. You can make your paintbrush a little smaller, and then you can just kind of clean it up. So that's probably what I would do here to get rid of that, unless you want to find another photograph that you know that maybe doesn't have all this, in which case that can make it, you know, having a good photograph that's easy to select sometimes is the way to go. But I think you know, you can see how that works. Right? So that's the main thing here I would do, is just work on that or replace it, and then work on this, replace it or remove it, just turn off those layers. And then finally, what I would say is to put the name of your character in. So the way to do that is you can actually just, you don't have to make a new, I'm going to click on this layer here so it goes above it. And then you just click on the type tool and click, you know, where you want to put that name, and then just type your name there. I think yours is some kind of one of the garbage dumps. Garbage dump. I'm just going to put Dan in there, but whatever your name is. It doesn't matter what your text is at this point. You don't have to design it or think about it. Just put that as placeholder text. Finally, the last thing I might do here as well is maybe make your character a wee bit bigger. I like where, you know, maybe he's ending at the top, but maybe bring him down a little bit more, like to fill the space. I would probably put garbage dump Dan a little lower, you know, and then maybe make him come down a little bit more, because you really want your character to stand out on your page and be really center stage. Okay, all right, really good job with the, you know, the layer masks, as I mentioned in my intro, are super important here. So, you know, having those already in development is really great. See, so with yours, I just put the black behind it just so we could see the layer mask, and overall I think your layer masks are looking pretty good. So I see all of your images with, I think, layer mask, maybe with the exception of this one right here, your chocolate chip. So I would go back and bring that one in and put that on, but the rest look, maybe this one as well I think is missing. Yeah, so your chocolate chips. Yeah. So put the layer mask there, and then it looks like maybe here, let's see. So so if you notice what I'm doing on these files is I'm right-clicking on where I want to see my what's underneath. And so when I right-click, what it will do is right underneath where I click, it will tell me what layers are behind that click. So starting with the neck, and then we go downwards, right? So the neck is, and then when I click on it, then it will take me directly to that layer in the layers panel. So it's a really easy step to navigate around your document. So here, it looks like there's a little bit left over here from your layer, from your original photograph. And so we can do just like we did previously. We can take and click directly on that layer mask, grab the paintbrush tool, and then we can, I'm going to take my bracket tool here, and on my right bracket I'm just going to zoom up here, and then I'm just going to, like, can you see, I'm just getting rid of that. So I'm actually painting on the layer mask and getting rid of it. When I did that, if you were watching, you would have seen the little white kind of blip disappearing. Okay. So you know, so there's a little bit here left over here. Let me just see here if we can fix that. What we're going to do here is we're going to just go to this particular layer mask. And so again, this is the beauty of layer masks, is everything's here. You know, again, if we disable this, we can see what's happening there with the photograph. So I'm going to enable it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click really quickly directly on the layer mask. And what this does is it brings up the area where you can refine the mask. And what I'm going to do here is go to the view mode. Now this doesn't affect the image at all. It's just to help me see. And I'm going to go on black because my selection, my background's white. So I want to go to black and see if that makes a difference. So now what I'm going to do here is, there's two things you can do here. Hold on, it looks like I actually played with this a little bit. Let me just back up a minute. Okay, so going back here to black, and again, you just want to pick the background that makes your layer mask selection look the worst, because that way you can see what problems there are. And so there's two things you can try here. One is you can start with this radius tool, this edge detection tool, and slide this bar, this little kind of bar, over to the right. And sometimes what it does is you can actually see it helped quite a bit. Now there's still a little bit of a faint white bit, but maybe we've done enough that we fixed it. The other thing you can do here too, if you want to do it more manually, sometimes this is good, is you can go to the refine edge brush tool right here that we've looked at already, this one right here, and then what you can do is you can again slide along this edge, just one pass, one single pass, and see, and that's a little bit better. And let's click OK. And so that's a little bit better, and we could do the same thing here. And then what happens is, maybe when we put it on a background, like another like kind of mid-tone background, that little edge might just disappear. So we may not have that as a problem later on. It's something, again, you can evaluate as you go through. Like next week, when you add your background, if you find that this little halo is still there, you can either like play around with it and you can mask it manually using that technique we did with the paintbrush, or you can find another image and work with it and see. You know, there's also a little bit of this yellow here, which I'd almost want to mask out because that seems a little distracting. Again, this is like where, you know, because we're doing this assignment in this class, this is a really good learning experience for how to choose photographs that you can select well. And it's really only in this process that you start seeing, oh yeah, you know, like this kind of photograph will work better as a selection than this kind of photograph. You know what I mean? Like it's like a kind of a process of understanding. There's also right here with this guy, this is a good image, but it looks like maybe you're missing a little bit of this edge right here. It disappeared. Now I'll show you how to fix this. So I'm going to again click directly. Oop, I don't want to go in here. Well, I could, but well, why don't we try that? So I'm going to go in here first and see. This is the area where Photoshop kind of fixes things. You can use the tools here to let Photoshop help you find the selection edge. So I'm going to just go down here. Okay, well it actually pulled it back. So it's you can see it's like a tiny bit transparent in there, but you know, and that's like because the mask is a little transparent there. Photoshop wasn't quite sure about it, but that you can see that it's not bad. And then I'll show you how to fix this. So what's happening here is you can see you're seeing through the image. That's where the mask isn't quite solid white, like because it's like sort of a gray. If we looked really closely here, it would be actually a gray color because it's blending those two. It's not ever like solid black. It's sometimes solid black and white, and sometimes you can get these gray areas. So we can fix it by again clicking directly on that layer mask, going to this brush again. I need to turn off that dialog box that always keeps popping up in the new CC. And then what I can do is switch to white, because white reveals and black hides, and I can actually zoom over this manually and solidify that photo. So now the waffle's not see-through anymore. It's actually solid, you know. So I can do that right here too. Now if I go too far over the edge, I'll show you what happens. I can actually start revealing that background manually too. You know, I can just go in here and scrub this out, which we don't, you know, we don't want to do, but anyhow, it's possible to do that. Okay, let me just hold on a second here and get Photoshop only goes back one step. It's the only program I know that does that. Okay, so what else can you do to your character? So you want to put the name somewhere of your character, just like we did. So what you might want to do is make your character a little bit smaller, maybe. In your case, maybe just a wee bit smaller so you can put the name at the bottom or the top. That's probably a good place for your character. Um, yeah, and I think that's the main thing. Something I feel like with your torso feels like maybe it's a wee bit small. I don't know if you thought that, but it's almost like it's like an afterthought. It's not quite reading as a torso. So what you might want to do, what I did here is let me show you those. Sometimes I do things quickly because so I selected the body, and I love that you named your layers the way you did, so it's easy to find them. And then I'm going to hit Command or Control T on my keyboard, which is the free transform. And I'm going to hold down my Shift key so I don't accidentally change the proportions. But you can see I can just kind of easily make this torso a little bit bigger, you know. Maybe I would make, well, I kind of like the arms that big. I don't know, maybe I'd make the neck a little shorter, you know, and make this guy a little bit bigger, but just kind of, yeah, that, you know, just for balance for the body. So you can play around with that, but overall, I think your character design is looking really good and it's really coming along. So yeah, just add those things in and you'll be set. Amy, yeah, it's just fine if you wanted to change, you know, some things with your character in terms of, you know, changing the name. It sounds like from Flippin' Food Fred to Flippin' Food Fran. That's just fine. Um, just make sure that it is using the name, even though that's a super cute name that you've come up with. The reason why is just because um, we're imagining that we're working for a client, which is Eclipse Entertainment. So when a client gives you that like their product name or other details about their product. As a designer, we don't really have any license. I mean, you can give feedback to your client, but in general, that's what we have to work with. And so our creativity comes in the graphic part and the concept for the graphics. So we would not tend to, you know, change those types of things, you know, names of products. So that's an easy fix. I don't think it makes any difference for your character. And I put the black behind it just to look at your layer mask, and they look pretty good. Yeah, did a nice job with that. Um, Maybe this little edge here for this is maybe a little bit rough, but you know, how do we know? We have to always go to the photograph. Oh, see, yeah, I see what's happening here. There's actually something behind it. Yeah, well, you know, I think that will work then. You can probably like something you can do at some point. I'm going to turn off this layer now just to sort of look at it. It's still a little kind of bumpy here too, but I would leave that for now because maybe the background you put behind it is going to hide it and it won't matter. But there is a way to smooth that layer mask without, you know, very easily, so we can look at that later on. Okay, I love the celery feet. I think that's super cute, and these arms, I think that's really cute. I'm not 100% sure about the hat at this point. The reason why, I think you did a lot of work on it, but it seems like maybe it's a little too cluttered, like it's starting to kind of, you know, get like too yeah, too cluttered. I might, let's see, sometimes when I'm working, like maybe just the orange would work. Like sometimes when I'm working, yeah, and if you take that, well, if you take that off, what would happen? How would that, maybe that would look okay too. So that's just something to think about, to play with. Sometimes when I think when we work on designs, it's true for me, and I think it's true for a lot of people, is that when we're working, we add a lot of ideas, a lot of things go in, and then in the process, the more sort of drafts, what you tend to do is sort of distill it to the essence of what it is, you know, and that can be a way to strengthen it. So I might maybe take out the flowers, maybe leave the orange, you know, but something you can think about. Um, I think your layer masks look good. I think the only layer mask I see missing here is the olive, so you might want to add that back in. Um, Kind of looking at that. It's cute. I don't know. Do I need it? Maybe. Yeah, maybe you do need it. So anyhow, so those are some thoughts. You know, it's always good to just keep experimenting. The last thing I will say is when you create your character, the background for it, I'm gonna maybe turn off this layer for just a moment. The canvas, something to think about is the orientation of your character. Like in your case, your character is horizontal, which you may not have known when you were designing it, but when you have designed it, can you see how it's like a little bit horizontal? Sometimes it can be nice to create a horizontal sort of stage for it. Now this is a wee bit small, but just to give you an idea, you could even go a little smaller or a little bit narrower up and down. You could also resize it so it's just like a little bit bigger, or your character's a little smaller in there, so it has more room around it. But you get the idea where we're kind of framing the character, whereas you know what you have is sort of there's a lot of space at the top and the bottom, which feels a little empty. It doesn't feel like it quite hugs the character. Um, Anyhow, so like tall characters can be like the like this portrait style, whereas horizontal characters can go more of the landscape kind of format. Okay, yeah, all right. I hope that's been helpful. So yeah, I love the design. I think this is looking really good. And Terrible Choice Todd, that looks terrific. So I'm just gonna click here to check the layer masks, and they look pretty good. There's a little bit, I think you can see some white areas here. Again, if you put this little black rectangle behind there, it'll show you all this stuff. So now you've seen all of the techniques that I have for fixing this, either like like for example, in this guy here, you could either double click here to get into the refine mask area and do those tricks of either using the refine edge mask tool here, which is actually, that works pretty good for you. You could use that to kind of fix up those edges, or you can paint back the layer mask if you need to. I'm going to cancel this out here. So that's always, you know, some things you can, you know, this white background here, I've kind of tweaked that a little bit. So you know how to do that now. Now, it's something I'm glad that you have this issue going on, because this is an issue that affects a lot of people, where what happens is you start seeing these white edges. I think this is maybe here. Yeah, we can see them here. These white edges, can you see these white edges here? I don't know why this happens in the selection process. This is something that's just sort of hard to, I have never been able to control for it. It's something that you need to fix after the fact, and it's this edge here of your actual original image. It's the edge right along the edge, right along the edge. And so to fix it, it's really easy. You just take and you click directly on that layer mask like we did before, and then you go and you use the paintbrush tool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and then you use black because you want to hide it, and black hides. And so you can go through here and just kind of just do that basically. And you can do that for all of these. Just locate the image that it is, and then just hide it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this off for a minute, and let's just look. So the only other thing I would suggest doing here is maybe either probably making your character a little bit bigger, or you can just use the crop tool here and just kind of like make it a little smaller so you don't have so much white space. You want your character to really stand out. I'm just going to sort of do a little bit of a quick, there we go. You know, something like that. Maybe a little bit higher at the top. You know, you don't want to crowd your character either. That's not a good idea. But you want to make it a little bit more, again, more center stage. So Terrible Choice Todd, that's great. You know, you could take out this text in here if you want to, that you've added all of the details here. I don't think you need to have that, even your name. I think it's okay to skip that. Just put the focus on the name of the character, and that'll be great. All right, nice job. Melanie. Yeah, you know, you said that your character didn't kind of quite come out the way you had planned, and yeah, that really is just the way things go. It's good to be flexible and allow your idea to develop as you work with it. Okay, so I'm going to actually turn off this background at this point. Just a note, we don't need to have a background for this week, and I know some people have been experimenting with that, and that's okay. But I like to turn them off just so I can see the character itself. But next week, what you want to do is you want to have a background that is a photograph, right? So we're not allowed to use any vector images like this, you know, notes or, you know, anything like that. It has to be a photographic background. So and kind of think about where your character might be. Maybe your character would be in a sound stage or in on a stage somewhere, a theater setting, or maybe hanging out and, you know, with other, you know, in a like practice hall or wherever, you know, whatever it kind of seems interesting to you. Um, okay, so I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to do what I did for the other folks, which is to just check your layer masks here. And I do see your layer mask here, which is great. They're all there. So now what we want to do is just double check just to see. Now, so why am I doing this really? Because right now everybody's got a white background pretty much, and that white background means that if you had a white background in your photograph, then you're not going to be able to see any of these kinds of edges here in your background, you know, like because it's hidden. But when you put a background behind that has a different color, then you may start seeing these edges. So that's why we're doing that. It's also just good practice to be able to really finesse a layer mask. It really is a great thing to do. And overall, I think you've done a nice job here. The only area is maybe right down here. I'm not really like thrilled about this particular image anyhow. Like somehow it seems a little flat. So I wonder if, like, let me just look here. I wonder if you could have like a symbol that's sort of tilting more forward, maybe. It's okay that like kind of it'll be more in perspective, so you'd sort of see more of the circular part of it. Do you know what I mean? That might be, and I understand why you chose this because you wanted it to be flat on the ground. But in when we like put the backgrounds in, you know, your character may be sort of in a more of a perspective, and so you could get a kind of a nicer photograph that looks more interesting by having more curves. I'll show you what I mean here. Google Images and found a symbol that was a little bit more slanted. You know, I'm sort of thinking something like this. Maybe it doesn't have to be so slanted, you know. And then it looks like you want to put this pole in. So what we could do now is just pull this down in our layers panel. There we go. And kind of like you can, if you don't want to have this on there, what you can do is take this guy, I'm clicking on the layer mask here, and then I can take the brush tool and then just kind of get rid of this guy. I'm going to do a terrible job here. I'm just going to kind of quickly go over, but you can kind of finesse that. And then what you can do is like you can position this symbol like on top, you know, wherever you want it to go. Anyhow, okay, that's what I would probably do for that is just again make it a little more of obvious object. It's so easy. Once you get the handle of layer mask, you can see it really took me literally about 3 minutes to just go in there and fix it. And I could probably, you know, I would like to just clean that up a little bit, but overall, you know, that's what I would suggest for that. Okay, what else can we do here? Make sure to have your name of your character, right? And then I would also make your character a little bit big, make it fill the space. But I think overall the design is coming along. I love the arms. I think that's really cute. So I'll just keep experimenting. Yeah, your character is really coming along with the design. It feels like it's like very, you know, has a kind of sense of integrity, even now with the colors. Now, something we don't have to worry about now with the colors because we are going to learn how to change the color of photographs later on. So don't worry if you feel like the colors, those of you out there, your colors don't seem to quite go together. That's okay, we can fix that. But yours, I noticed you've already got like a kind of a red and brown with sort of a whitish off-white vanilla palette, which is great. The one thing now you want to do here is make sure that all of your objects have layer masks for them. So you want to make sure that you have that layer mask with the photograph. So the best way to fix that is to use the tutorial for the instructions for this assignment, and it walks you through how to pull in the photograph and then how to apply the layer mask. So you need to do that for all of your photographs. So that's I would say, the most important thing for you to work with at this point is getting those layer masks in. Again, your character design's coming along. Just remember that it's, again, like I mentioned before, we unfortunately cannot be creative with the name of the character, so you want to keep it with either Flippin' Food Fran or Flippin' Food Fred, whichever one that you chose. Yeah, I know what you mean about the water. That's, you know, I'll kind of have that in the back of my mind, and sort of entertain how we might be able to do that to isolate water. That could be, it is hard. Um, so we'll see. But for now, let's just focus on, you know, the character, and you know, we can explore that further. So I'm going to turn off the background again here, just because it does make it easier to look at the character. And just a note for everybody, you know, so the background and adding text is really the main thing that we're working on next week. So we have a lot of time to do that. So you can really, you know, explore different backgrounds and really play around with that. Okay, this looks pretty good. So these are so we've got your layer mask in here, and you've got a little bit of a line here, so you could just kind of like look at that. Where is that coming from? I'm guessing it's probably right from, where is that coming from? It's coming from one of the photos, but let's see here. This one? No. Must be this one. There we go. Yeah, so what you can do here is you can like work on this little white area and then this kind of like line right in here, you know, with the techniques that we've explored so far in class. And I think that's really it in terms of layer masks. Everything else looks pretty good. Now so we continue having non-destructive editing with the layer masks means that, you know, next week we may see other things that we could work on. So it's a little bit like playing with those edges, you know, as we go through. So I'm like kind of thinking about this rose here, you know, I'd sort of look, is everything there? Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, okay, so yeah, so you got your text, which is great. I'm going to turn this layer off now. I don't think we need it anymore. So I would say that in your character, what I would think about doing, I like the overall design, but to kind of think about having more visual weight in your character. The reason why is that when we add our background, even your background right now, can you see how your character really disappears? That's because the visual weight it's just so delicate. So you can have delicate parts, but think about how you might have a little more visual weight in different areas. Like maybe you could work on having a torso that's more substantial, you know? So I would maybe think about that. You know, maybe something you can always do too is like take something like a head and exaggerate the size. I'm going to hold down that shift key, you know, with the transform. You know, you can kind of make things a little more, again, like more exaggerated, different things, like maybe the arms could be exaggerated. That can also give you a little more visual weight. So I might work on that at this point. So yeah, think about visual weight, and I'm going to undo this for the moment here just to look at what else we have. I might consider taking out this leaf for now, possibly taking it like just like kind of masking it out, just because I'm sort of thinking about what are the different ways that we could make it look more like a character rather than a rose, you know, because that's what people will see. So maybe kind of thinking maybe taking that out would be helpful. I might play with the horns, you know, maybe make them a little bit bigger and more substantial as well, you know, to kind of just, again, to kind of get your character really starting to, can you see, actually that's pretty cool. Like again, it makes it more character-like. Okay, so those are some of the things I would work on. I'm actually going to go down to this layer. I think it's empty. I'm going to add just a white background at this point. And that's something you can do too. you could fill the whole space. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I just find, for me personally, that the checkerboard pattern can be distracting when you design. So having a white background, whether it's the canvas or a layer, I think can make it easier for you as you design. Okay, all right, yeah, so you've got a nice start to your character. So yeah, love the leaf you have here. So what you want to make sure you do here is with all of your objects, you want to have them all done with a layer mask. Okay, so so the hair, it looks like you have a lot of these kind of curly fries. What you can do is just have one photograph here, like this one here, with the layer mask, and then you can just take, once you've added, you bring back the photograph, just use the tutorial for in the instructions for this assignment to add your photograph and then mask it. And then what you can just do is duplicate that particular layer over and over again, duplicating it. Now I won't be able to do it here. There's no layer mask, but it's the same principle, is that you can take and drag it down to the bottom here where there's a little icon that will duplicate it. And then you don't have to mask all of these curly fries, you know what I mean? Because you'll be able to just use the duplicate of that. Okay? All right, so that's the main thing here. So I would say, so I'm a little bit hesitant to about the logo here. The reason why is, we're working for a company that's not McDonald's. It's Eclipse Entertainment, and so we don't want to brand it with some other company's brand, So if you want to have like a little fry box, what you can do is you can just go to the internet and like go and find fast food containers that are blank. Let me see if I can find one for you. French fry, fast food, French fry container, I could take out the fast food there. And did I even spell that right? Is it French fry or French F-R-Y? I don't know. Anyhow, so I also did my trick of like going to the tools area and making sure that my image size was big, and I also chose for my image search photos because I was getting a lot of vector images. But you can go through and you can find some fast food containers that are blank, like that don't have logos on them. So you might want to go through and find something like that. Or just use something else here for that particular image. There's always different possibilities here for building your character. I kind of like the idea of maybe having some arms. I don't know if you thought about that, to make it look more like a character, to really try to build on that. So keep playing with it. Make sure you add your name. Okay, add your layer masks, and yeah, so I think we can work on the design a little bit more next week, but once we have the layer masks in place and the name, that'll be really helpful.